So without further ado, let's learn from Richard Culatta why the tech industry needs more humanities. Morning. Oh, there you go. How's everyone doing? Good. I hope this will not feel like a very formal presentation. Those of you who know me know I don't do formal very well. I just want to share some thoughts. First being that I'm incredibly honored to be here. I don't know exactly what happened to the 10 other people that they had before me on the list, but I'm glad they all suffered, major accidents and weren't able to come today, so that I could be here. But it truly is an honor to be here. But shortly before I graduated from BYU, President Monson came and he was talking to students that were getting ready to graduate, many of us, and go on to something else. And he challenged us to find a unique problem that needed to be solved, and then to focus on becoming uniquely qualified to address that problem. He said to fill the niche, that was the word that he used. Which was helpful for me to hear, because I tend to have a little bit of career ADHD. I kind of want to do something different every couple weeks. I've always thought there should be like a subscription. When you eat those services where you can subscribe and get fruit sent to you once a month in the mail or whatever. I always thought there should be one for jobs, right? Where you do like job of the month and you got to subscribe and go do somebody else's job every month. But anyway, that was important for me to hear. So, focus on something where there's a need that you can become uniquely qualified to address. And so I started looking for that. And I tried to pay particular attention to things that seemed particularly weird to me, particularly out of whack to me, that other people weren't reacting to as much as I was. Right? When I was in the room, I'm thinking, why isn't everybody else freaking out about this? And those were indications to me that maybe there were things that I had a unique ability to either sense or do something about, or just a passion for, that others maybe didn't. And that could be a clue. One of those areas of things that just bothered me was the inequities in terms of access to learning that existed around the world and around the US. Before I graduated, I was very fortunate to get an ORCA grant. I think they may still do those. Undergraduate, there's sort of these research grants that you can get, right? So I got this ORCA grant, and I was able to go and work with a foundation, I was partnered up with them through the Kennedy Center, called the Rose Education Foundation, or Colegio Mesoamericano in Spanish is how they talk about it. And this was a group that was trying to help improve learning opportunities for students in rural Guatemala. Now, Guatemala is interesting when you get out of the city, because it is not, largely the families there are living off of the land. And what you can see, you can actually see a picture of this hill here. So you have this, a family, and they grow their food, and they sort of live off the land, and they sell some of the food to grow. And then as their kids get older, the father divides up the land, and so you can see here, you said this plot that used to be like this is now these 4 plots, and each of their kids gets one of those, and they begin to raise their family on that land. And what happens over time, because then when their kids grow, they divide their land up, the amount of land that they have to live on literally is not large enough to sustain life anymore, right? It's been broken up and divided up so many times that it leads to this really tragic sort of downward spiral of a poverty cycle. And the only chance, the only opportunity to break out of this is to provide education opportunities. Of course, there is essentially no public school that would resemble anything that we would think looked like a school. So this foundation said, well, we're going to try to build some schools down there, try to help out, and I had a chance to help with them. And we were doing everything that we could to try to make a difference for these kids. We were recruiting teachers. I was recruiting all my friends from BYU to go down and teach for a semester down there. We were bringing in books and supplies. We were just doing everything we knew how to do. But I remember sitting one day and thinking, none of this is actually making the difference that we needed to. Sure, it's helping, but it is never putting them on the same plane, the same level that they need to actually be able to be successful in this world. And then I had this really crazy idea. Now remember, this may seem obvious now, but this was 15 years ago. And so, maybe longer now, it's been a while. And so we said, what if we were to try to connect those schools to the internet? Remember, this was a town that didn't have phone service, right? So this was a pretty crazy idea. And we found somebody who I think now we found out was marginally legal, but found somebody that had the ability to take this plastic, it was like this big piece of Tupperware, it was like this satellite dish thing, and beam it off of some satellite and get internet to the schools. And so we tried to do that. And there's a picture of me, I actually found an old picture of me hanging from telephone lines, stringing Cat5 cable across the street to get to the school. And you notice I'm in a shirt and tie because I was teaching that day. And it was the end of the day, and I went to go see if they finished installing the internet. We had all these contractors sitting around looking at this ladder, and it was like made out of sticks and totally falling apart. And they're like, we're not gonna climb that thing. I'm like, well, somebody's gotta climb that thing. You can see how that ended up. So it was me, and we ended up connecting this school. And the more important picture is, this is what happened just a few minutes later, which was the director, Guillermo Sanchez, he was the director of the school, doing the first internet search on a former BYU lab computer at Chimaltenango, Guatemala. And the thing that is key, the thing that's critical here, is that the moment that we plugged in that cable, the moment that we connected that school, these kids suddenly had a chance. Now, I don't want to minimize the fact they still needed great teachers, they still needed good curriculum, they still needed to eat, some of them were coming to school healthy, all of that stuff. They needed health, we had to keep track of all that. But they actually had a chance because for the first time in their lives, in generations, they had access to the same information and the ability to connect to the same experts and the access to expertise that their peers in the city and their peers around the world have. And for once, they had a shot. That was a very powerful moment for me. It's when I realized that that really was this niche that President Monson talked about that I wanted to work on filling. I wanted to find a way to use technology to be able to find ways to connect opportunity to students and people around the world that wouldn't have otherwise. So today I want to pass along President Monson's request to you. But I'm going to take the liberty of adapting just a little bit, as it's been 15 years, and I think we can do that. But I'll be clear of the part that I'm adapting so that you can know what is truth, mingled with scripture there, so you'll be able to figure out what part of it you want to believe in. But I want to adapt his invite slightly for you to highlight an area that I think the people in this room are uniquely qualified to address. And I'm going to do that by making 3 points about using tech to solve tough problems. So here we go. Point number 1. Coding is the universal language of problem solving. If you think of any tough problem that you think of that we face as a society, code, at least at some point along the way, is almost always part of the solution. As a Spanish major, it won't surprise you that I care deeply about how we're teaching languages in schools. I think we need to do a much better job. But if you think we need to do a better job of teaching languages in schools, you should look at how we're doing at teaching coding, which I would call the language of problem solving in schools. We are way, way behind the ball on that. When I went to Rhode Island, my charge from the governor, I had a very simple charge. She said, turn the state into a center for innovation and creativity. Go figure out what that means. Okay. So one of the first things that I did is I said, how are we teaching our students the language of problem solving? How are we teaching them to code? And I went and I looked and I pulled the numbers, and it turned out that we were doing a terrible job. There were like 20 kids in the state that had passed the APCS test. In fact, I think Guam might have been the only place that was worse than Rhode Island was when it came to teaching computer science. And we can argue about size and number of people and whatever, but we realized that we needed to do a problem. So we made a bold statement. We said, we want Rhode Island to be the first state in the country to have computer science taught in every school. We didn't want to just do a little better. We wanted to leapfrog, which was funny because I had no idea how we were going to do that and no money. And we could sort of go on with that story. It's a longer story. But the quick version is we started a bunch of boot camps over the summer, started teaching teachers. We made maps that could show which school had computer science being taught and which didn't, with the number of the principals. Just happened to be right there of any school that didn't. So if parents wanted to know who they could call those principals. And we ended up creating this program called Computer Science for Rhode Island, CS4RI. And the end of the story is this year, by December of this year, Rhode Island will be the first state in the country to have computer science taught in every school, which is a pretty awesome thing to have a chance to have been a part of. My focus on making sure we had computer science taught in the schools was not about having all these kids become computer programmers, have them get jobs at Google. Sure, some of them will, and by the way, it'll open up a whole bunch of opportunities for jobs, but that wasn't the reason. This is me, I'm sitting here with Governor Raimondo at a school in Providence. This is one of the most underserved schools in the state, highly diverse, as you can see from some of the students in the picture, and one of the first schools where we launched the CS4RI program. And the reason that we did this was because we wanted to give them the tools to problem solve. if we don't prepare students to code now, we've essentially outsourced our ability to invent the future. And that's scary, and that keeps me awake at night. Now, the reason that coding is so important and why it's such an important tool is it's different from other tools that we've used to be able to solve tough problems. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this. If you've ever read anything around diffusion of innovations or thought about how that works, the really quick summary of a whole bunch of people's master's theses is ideas are easy to come up with. Solutions are really easy to come up with, right? No, I don't get that hard. Solutions are, medium easy to come up with. The problem with good ideas is getting them to scale. We can find the solution to almost any problem, but to get it to reach the people who need it is incredibly difficult. And that's sort of what often we sort of draw these charts, and there's this chasm right there in the middle, which is you can have a great idea, but if you can't get it to take off, it doesn't actually have impact. And there are many, many examples of technologies and ideas and solutions that were better than the things that we've ended up having adopted, right? Look at Beta and VHS. Look at the old gas-lit refrigerators versus the one that we had. We can go down the list of all these better ideas, better solutions that never were able to make it to be distributed. And the reason that technology, that coding is so powerful is because built into the solution is the ability to scale. Built into the way that we're using tech is the ability to overcome the hardest problem here, which is reaching the people that need the solution. So I wanted to just share that. And I want to share one other thought before I move on to my next point, which is Kurt Allen. And I think I saw Kurt walk in. He's sitting in the back there. One of my dear friends and mentor to me shared a book with me called Abundance. And in that book, and I highly recommend it to all of you, it basically the thesis of the book is the challenge in our world is not a scarcity of resources, it's access to them. And so that's a really profound statement I think we all need to be thinking about, and part of why I think it's so important that we recognize the power of using technology to solve the problem. So there's my first point. Coding is the universal language of problem solving. I give you a warning before I go to the second one. If my first point was like the glass is half full point, my second point is the glass is half empty point. And that is that if we are not careful, we can very quickly code away humanity. As powerful as tech is as a tool for problem solving for the future, we are in a dangerous moment right now of allowing it to engineer our way out of humanity. Think about it. Most of the tech that mediates our lives, because tech mediates almost all aspects of our lives at this point, it's not designed by somebody who was required to take the classes that the humanities majors sitting in this building are required to take. They didn't spend the time grappling with the ethical issues, understanding the cultural differences and language differences, understanding the value, the necessity of hearing opposing viewpoints. All of that rigor, all the things that the students in this room are going to walk in to talk about in their next class here, were not part of the discipline that the people that are creating these tools had as part of their background. And when this happens, the very tech that can help solve tough problems fails us. And we've seen that, and there's a couple examples. One of the maybe most obvious ones is social media, right? Social media is a great solution. It helps us keep connected to people and events that we care about, right? But the solution is optimized around keeping you continually clicking on the items in your feed, right? So your feeds have been engineered by people who are trying to solve that problem to show you only information that reinforces your existing beliefs. Because guess what? If the problem we're trying to solve is keep you clicking on the links in your feed, if we've continually reinforced what you already believe, it turns out that it actually works really well to solve that problem. By the way, you can test this out. Have you ever done this? Have you ever used somebody else's computer and you've logged into like Facebook? I did this during the elections once, and on my feed, will not be much of a surprise to you knowing my background. My feed, had things like, Donald Trump is not trustworthy. Everyone thinks he's incompetent to be president, right? We have all these things. So I go and I log into somebody else's computer, and all of the feed, all the news items were saying, Hillary Clinton can't be trusted. Everyone thinks she's unfit to be president. And I'm like, how is this? This is my same Facebook that is delivering me the information that I know to be true. And yet that other person who had a very different view was looking at their very same feed and getting all that information that was reinforcing their beliefs. And I sort of knew that was the case. But in that moment, when there was something that I cared so deeply about, and at a time where there was so much news, and I say that in quotes because it felt like I was using Facebook as a way to get news that was reinforcing my view, to see how completely opposite, 180 degrees, the information that somebody else was receiving was on the tool that they felt was just just as accurately showing what everybody else thinks, was incredibly different. And that was a real wake-up moment for me. The results of this, the results of having our views broadcast back to us and never being presented with views that challenge our opinions, is potentially devastating to humanity. Never having our viewpoints challenged is detrimental to us as a society. This is an article from just 2 days ago in The Atlantic. It talks about the misinformation that Google provided in the critical hours after the Las Vegas shooting. Because, and you can read more about it if you want to go and look at this is from The Atlantic, because Google was programmed by algorithm to respond to queries, even though in this particular case, its search index didn't have the appropriate responses, right? So they're basically, their algorithm says, if you have enough information, by the fact that you have enough information and enough people looking at the right things, the right stuff will rise to the top. But this was a case that they didn't have enough information because it was a new event. And they were presenting as news, in their news column, search results that were not news. And in fact, were incredibly misleading. And again, you can look at that story. I won't dive deep into what happened there, but it's a case where Google failed us by using technology that was engineered to solve a problem, but was not factoring in what it meant for us as a society. Last example. I could give many more, but we'll stop with this one. This is a fascinating case that's happening now, which I'm really surprised has not gotten more news around the world. The ACLU is suing the state of Idaho right now, and the quick version of this is the state of Idaho created a tool to help automate the decision about the allotment of Medicaid benefits, right, to people who need help with a variety of resources to support their families. But here's the quick version of what happened here. First, the data that was being used to create their algorithm was inaccurate. And so they had this database that they were using to look for trends, and then using those trends to make recommendations about what future trends should be. But 2/3 of the data was not correct. It was just flat out wrong. And believe me, I worked in government for a long time. There's lots of inaccurate data that we have. It just is kind of lots of databases where it wasn't entered in right, whatever. But then when we applied the tech to it, we were making these sort of decisions looking for trends on data that just wasn't accurate. So that's the first problem. The second problem is there were actually statistical flaws in the algorithm that somebody had created to pump out that number that said how many people, what benefits people should get. But everybody was convinced because it was popping up on a screen that said, here's your person, you entered in this information, and bling, here's your magic number. Nobody was stopping to say, wait, that's a flawed number. It's not right. Because they were assuming that they could trust it because it was coming from the computer. We live in a highly engineered world, and this will only increase as the amount of our interactions are mediated through technology. And the tools, as I mentioned in my first point, are not bad, but they're designed by teams of people who didn't consider as one of their metrics how they could improve how these tools could improve or really damage our society. And that brings me to my final point. Point 3, coding should be a required course for humanities majors. Software developers are trained to ask questions like how and can we build it? Humanities majors are trained to ask questions like what are the ethical implications if we were to build it? The skill of knowing how to solve problems and the skill of knowing what problems to solve are not the same thing. And if you don't choose to participate, if we don't choose to participate in that conversation, we allow others who don't have that background that we do to take our seat at the table. And the way you get invited to the table is you speak the language. Turns out I'm not the only one that thinks that. This article came out just recently in the Harvard Business Review, after, by the way, long after I'd already submitted the topic of this talk. I happened to see this, and it says, it's talking about liberal arts in the digital age. I will let you go read it. I would highly recommend that you do read it. I just want to read two quick lines out of it, just to give you a flavor. First one is this. To effectively tackle today's biggest social and technological challenges, we need to think critically about their human context, something humanities graduates happen to be well trained to do. Word for word out of that article. The second one said, what matters now is not the skills you have, but how you think. Can you ask the right questions? Do you know what problem you're trying to solve in the first place? That's a niche that humanities majors are uniquely positioned to address. Could you imagine, I often imagine this, as I'm interacting with tools and systems on the interwebs, what it would look like if it was designed by a humanities major, right? Let's imagine for a second, what if Facebook was designed by a humanities major? You would clearly have somewhere in there this option that said, what's your level of echo that you would like to choose? Echo chamber, I only want to hear, have my existing views reinforced. Balanced diet, right? Healthy option, mix of viewpoints. Hardcore, I only want to hear opposing viewpoints. And you could choose which version you wanted, right? Now, you wouldn't take away their right. If somebody wanted to just hear their own views repeated back to them, they could choose that. But just the act of allowing that to be a decision brings a level of humanness to what's going on in our technology-mediated world. And there's all kinds of others. By the way, I sat thinking last night as I was creating this about all the other possible permutations of this I could create. This is the only one I did because I was running out of time. But I thought another one might be like a Facebook post where when you go to hit post, the tool actually takes it and spits it back to you first as if it was somebody else posting about you. And then you could decide whether or not you wanted to still post it or not, right? Like, here's what that post said if it was somebody that was saying the thing you were about to say about them, about you. Do you still want to post? Right? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? I would love to go to town just getting on a whiteboard with everybody in the School of Humanities and saying, what if you were to redesign Facebook? What would it look like? Fortunately, there are many, many good examples out there of tech that was designed by people that were thinking about humanity as they were doing their design. And I'm going to just share a couple briefly with you, and then I'll stop and hopefully we can have a chance for some discussion. This is one of my favorites. It's a tool called No One Eats Alone. It's a tool that was built online to help schools make sure that nobody in the cafeteria has to sit at that table in the corner by themselves. And it brings the community around supporting the students. And as a kid who spent a lot of time sitting at the table in the corner by myself as I was going through school, that is a tool that, it's a way to use technology that solves a human problem. Here's another one, some of you may be familiar. This is a tool called TrafficCam, trafficcam.com. So TrafficCam is a tool that's looking at using tech, using code, to address the very challenging issue that we have of human trafficking. And the way it works is fascinating. So when you go in, you get the app on your phone. Some of you may have you tried this app before? Anybody here used it? Yeah, awesome. So you go into a hotel room that you're staying in, and you take a picture, you take several pictures of your hotel room. And it makes sort of like a DNA footprint or fingerprint, whatever you want to call it, of your hotel room. It looks for things that are specific to that hotel room. The distance between the furniture, the way the curtains are positioned, where there are marks on the wall. And it starts to be able to create this category of exactly this sort of library of hotel rooms around the world. And then the tool uses that to match against pictures on the internet of people that are being solicited as part of human trafficking networks, and allows law enforcement to identify in what hotel rooms those are taking place, and then very quickly be able to address where those issues are and provide help for people who need them. That's an example of using tech to address a very important human problem. One more, one of my favorites. This is a game called Never Alone. You can download it on your phone or on where on the computer. It was a game developed in collaboration with the Yup'ik indigenous Alaska Native people, and they have the challenge of a culture that's dying. And they brought together 40 of the Alaska Native elders, storytellers, community leaders, and they asked them to help design this game. So in this game, if you play it, and I think you should, it's also beautiful. You play as a young Alaska Native girl and her Arctic fox that go through this experience trying to find the source of an eternal blizzard that's endangering their lives. But along the way, you learn about the culture and the language of a people that's at risk of disappearing. So it's a fascinating example. And one other point that I want to make before wrapping up here is you don't just have to build an app. One of the things that I spend a lot of my time thinking about at ISTE is how are we creating the next generation of digital citizens, right? When I was teaching, I did my student teaching just down the road here at Timpview. We would try to teach our kids, how do you organize people around doing good? How do you help them have an impact in the world? I think we did an activity where we're trying to teach them to recycle or something. And we say, what do you do? Well, let's make posters and stick them up around the halls. Today, if you want to organize people around a cause, you're not going to make posters and stick them up somewhere. You're going to go post it on Facebook or use a text messaging campaign or Twitter or whatever those are. But we're not teaching people. We're not teaching the future leaders of our society to use tech in a way to organize people for good. We're not thinking about, we need to think about how do we, what does it mean to respectfully disagree online? What does it mean to evaluate the quality of resources that we're seeing in a digital space? I used to be able to pick up a newspaper or even a website, and if it was a news website and it looked like a news website because it had the right news website font, I could tell that that was true information, right? Well, now I can spin one of those up with a WordPress theme, and by the time we're done with this session, right? I will have a site that looks more newsworthy than the New York Times or pick whichever flavor of news you want, right? It will look way more newsworthy because I just downloaded this theme, and it doesn't mean that it is. And so this skill of how do we decipher, just because we see a very realistic looking news site purporting something, whether it's real or not, those are skills that we need to train digital citizens to do. And who's doing that? It's not the people building Facebook. It needs to be us here in this room. So those are some of the opportunities. Now look, I'm almost out of time here, and so I want to end by assigning you homework. I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to just do it anyway, because why not? I used to be a teacher, I assigned everybody homework. So here's your homework, and it goes right back to where I started with President Watson. He said two things, and then I'm adding a third one on there. He said two things. The first is, right, identify problems that need to be solved. How do you do that? Well, there's a number of ways. One of the things that I shared that worked for me was paying attention to things that made you feel uncomfortable when other people weren't necessarily feeling uncomfortable. Areas where you thought, why isn't everybody frustrated about this? Right? And there are probably many other ways, and I'd love it if you shared back with me ways that you went about deciding what problem needs to be solved. And don't feel like every problem needs to conquer the world. I think sometimes we have a boil the ocean problem, right? Where we want to solve a problem that helps everybody everywhere all over the world all at once, and so then we give up when we can't make that happen. But small things that change your community, that change the people that sit around you, make a huge difference. So think about a problem that needs to solve. And the second is, become uniquely qualified to solve that problem. For you, that means two things. One, it means the knowledge of the humanities. It means understanding the viewpoint that you are gaining as you go through programs here on campus. But the second is learning the language of problem solving. And I mean that literally. I literally am saying everybody here in this room needs to learn how to code. Fortunately, there are some easy ways to do it. There are two resources that I showed here that are free and awesome, by the way. Udacity, you can go to Udacity Intro to Computer Science, and it's a course that will step you through from, if you can turn on a computer, you can start with that course right there. You don't need to know anything else. Khan Academy also has a Khan Academy computing sort of section that will step you through the same thing. You can try both of them. They're both free, very high quality, and they start at level 0. If you can type www.khanacademy.org, that's your baseline for being able to take the course. And this doesn't matter whether you are faculty members here, whether you are students. There's no age at which this does not apply. And you don't have to be tech savvy. This is not, I'm not saying you're going to become an IT specialist. That's what we're talking about here. It's a language that we need to learn in order to participate in the conversation. I'm incredibly grateful as I look in the back to see Dave Egbert sitting back here, one of my mentors and dear friends, who, when I was here as a student, pushed me to learn how to code. Pushed me to help use code as a language to solve tough problems. And I benefited that for the rest of my life. And then the last one that I'm going to add in here, and I'm adding this because I really think it's critical, is to partner with somebody who can help you build the solution. Just because you go in and learn to speak the language doesn't mean you're going to walk out and be able to build a perfectly operating iPhone app the next day, or be able to edit the code on Facebook and immediately. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying learn the language, but in order to really take this as skill, you need to be partnering with people. Partner with people like Dave Egbert and others that actually do know how to take this stuff to scale, but be the person in that conversation that's able to shape what's going on, to shape the questions that are being asked. For students, it means walk across and meet some people in the Tanner building over there and help get them involved with problems that you think need to be solved. For faculty, it means being able to partner with faculty in some of these schools, computer science, engineering, business, who are experts in knowing how to solve problems, but are in desperate need of your partnership on the what to solve. And I think those cases lead to mutual benefit for society, but also just practically for you as researchers. Let me end with a final thought, because I'm out of time. Let me just share one of my favorite movies. Have you seen this movie, Sliding Doors? In case you hadn't seen it, this is a movie about Gwyneth Paltrow and Gwyneth Paltrow. They play a movie where they're running, it opens where she's running down the stairs at the underground in London to get on the tubes, and she's just about to get on the train, and she runs and barely jumps on and makes it, the door shuts, and off she goes, right? And then the movie stops, and it rewinds, and it shows the same scene again, where she comes running down the stairs, but this time, right as she gets to the bottom, a little kid steps out in front of her and she sort of bumps into him and helps pick up his stuff, and then runs and just barely misses the train. The door shuts, boom, and off the train goes, and she isn't on the train. And then you can see as the movie evolves from that point on, it keeps cutting back and forth between these two lives that end up in entirely different places. One, she ends up in a very happy place, the other, she ends up dead. And so, I really did just ruin the movie for you. But it does not ruin the movie. Still go watch it. Seriously, go watch it, right? But it ends up in these entirely different movies. By the way, I think about this every time I'm in DC on the metro, like running to catch up. Like, I gotta get on that train or I'm gonna die! Totally different places because of whether or not she missed that train. And I just feel like that's the appropriate metaphor to end this conversation with. The first train is the train where technology moves with its current trajectory, capable of solving major problems, but systematically engineering to extinguish humanity. This is a train that, as Paul said, as I was talking on the phone the other day, this is a brave new world that only a few people want to live in. And then the other train is the world where people in this room, people who have the background that you have, are becoming fluent in the conversation needed to shape and shift the conversation. It's a world where the technology decisions are being shaped by people who understand language and culture and art. It's a world where the what we solve is as, if not more important than the how we solve it. And we right here, literally you sitting in this room, you have the ability to make that world a reality. You have the ability to change the world by being part of that conversation. And so my ending plea to you is please don't miss that train. Thank you.